Well, right, let's continue with our keynotes here at Move. Please welcome on stage the Chief Operating Officer of Archer. Please welcome on stage, it's Tom Muniz. Thank you, please take a seat. So, let's talk a little bit about how you are going to change how we all travel in a few years' time. But let's go back and ask you about what life was like when you started to imagine a world of eVTOL. And what is that, please? What was the old world that you were looking at and thought, I need to change this existing system?
Absolutely. So, yeah, eVTOL, not the most interesting name for an industry or a new market, but it stands for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing. But a better way to think about it is the mission at Archer is to give people a new way to move around cities all around the globe, where instead of being stuck in the ground, where we're congested or there's geography in the way, you're able to fly freely through the air with a new type of aircraft, totally sustainable, safe, quiet, giving people this flexibility and freedom to move around. That's really what everything's all about.
And can you tell me about the early days of the industry and something that many people would raise their eyebrows and think, well, that's science fiction?
Absolutely. I think, so I've been working on these aircraft for almost 15 years now, which I think most people are quite surprised to hear because they think, oh, is this just happening now? Are you talking about the Jetsons cartoon, right, that people might remember in the US? But the reality is people have been doing R&D in this area for 15 years. And we're very much at the point now where this is reality, it's happening. I myself have built 8 different full-scale aircraft that have gone through the full kind of demonstration of capabilities. And so when I joined Archer about 3.5, 4 years ago, the great thing that we did is we crystallized at the very beginning of the company this focus on commercializing the technology, right? At this point, there's no science projects. It's basically we're taking electric motors that are not too different from what are in cars today, batteries that are not too different from what are in cars today, combining that with technology around software and automation, and we're able to produce these new aircraft that take off and land vertically like a helicopter, but then transition to forward flight on a wing and are essentially very efficient, quiet aircraft. So the idea is we want to move people in and around cities, right? Early days, it's probably, I think Heiko mentioned earlier, right? Great mission is you're in Manhattan in New York City and you need to get to, say, Newark or JFK. I mean, that can be a brutal trip, right? Easily hour and a half on the ground. We can deliver that same service at comparable cost to what people are paying today for rideshare.
That's incredible. Can you tell us about some of the daily challenges that you had, even perhaps before joining Archer, but in the early days of an industry, and explaining what that industry was to people, and then having to go away and do your day job and solve these challenges after you've done the marketing talk?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, nowadays it's mostly the comments I get are, oh, this makes total sense. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. But you know, if you go back 10 years ago, people were very skeptical. And on a technology side, so my background is in engineering, it's a fair question that 10 years ago, batteries were not quite there as far as energy density to get practical usage out of these sorts of aircraft. And the motors were not quite as power dense as they are today. The great thing is the industry that we are building at Archer for this new form of mobility sort of leverages all the technology that's already being built upon for ground-based transit, right? EVs. So as batteries have continued to get better, right, on average something like a 6% increase in energy density over the last 20-ish years, that just means the product that we're bringing to market now is going to have even better capabilities in the very near term.
How did you keep the faith in those early days?
I think for me personally, once I had built enough of these vehicles, right, and seen them fly, from a physics first principles perspective, it was just obvious that this made sense. And so I live in the Bay Area in Northern California, and the congestion on the ground there is just, it's a huge factor in how you live your life, right? And there are places that are only 30, 40 miles away from where I live, but I would never think of going there during a weekday because the traffic is too much, right? You would never do it. A good example is up like Sonoma, Napa, right? Wine country. It's very close to where I live, but it could take 2-3 hours to get there. So seeing that the technology is possible, seeing that there's these great missions, right? Hearing from more and more people that I spoke with, different places in the US, but also around the world, I mean, it just makes sense to do this, right? And there's many challenges. It's not going to be easy, but the future is so compelling, let's say.
Was there a turning point when you realized that this was possible to commercialize?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mentioned before, kind of the first box that we checked was the technology makes sense, right? And so we did that by building aircraft, flying them, show what the capabilities were. But then I think a unique thing at Archer was when we started designing the product that we're commercializing now, we took a very analytical approach to figure out what the right performance capabilities were. And the way we did that is we looked at how people move around cities today and took those big data sets and simulated, okay, if we could have this product and fly these particular routes, what would people be willing to pay? How much time could we save them? And that really crystallized for us, wow, the business opportunity is huge. So if you think about a big congested city in the US, like Los Angeles, there's something like 50 million trips a day in LA. And of those, we think 5 million trips a day, we could save people more than half the time they're spending. Obviously, that's like an incredible challenge. It'll take years and decades to address that. But even if you just clip off the low-hanging fruit of, again, these airport to city center routes, I mean, what a compelling product that would be.
Absolutely. I'd like it now, please. As COO of Archer, how do you go about building an industry-leading team of experts in a field that's so nascent?
Yeah, it's a great question. We were super thoughtful about that. And I think what yields the best high-performing teams is a really broad set of backgrounds and experiences. So what we're doing is obviously very new, but in many ways, it pulls from lots of existing industries. So when we set out to build the team, we wanted to make sure we were bringing on people that know aerospace, right? It's a heavily regulated industry. You need good relationships with the regulators. You need experience building incredibly robust, safe technology. So the existing aerospace industry has been doing this successfully for the last many decades. But the aerospace industry is not known for innovation, right? And if we don't push technology, we're not going to have a product that's going to be successful. So we also combined kind of the Silicon Valley, let's call it, entrepreneurial type folks to bring in that more first principles engineering perspective in with aerospace. But then lastly, a lot of what we're building, particularly on the powertrain side, so motors, batteries, is very similar to what's in electric cars today, as I said earlier. So we've got a big contingent that comes from the automotive industry. Heiko talked earlier about the Stellantis team. So we've had a great relationship with Stellantis over the last 3 years, started early on the engineering side. Now, as we've gotten much further along in our commercialization process, they're helping us stand up our factory that's out in the state of Georgia in the US. So I think we've got a lot of momentum, and it really comes back to some of these strategic things around getting that right mix of perspective and talent and getting that right strategy to go to market.
How do you balance that mix of working in an innovative field that moves quickly with aviation? Now, my wheelhouse is automotive, and it's interesting. My US friends say, "Oh, you guys are so behind. We've got all the Tesla, full self-driving beta," because that's the US system with the roads, whereas our road system in Europe is a bit more like the aviation system. Rather than put it on the road and then fix it afterwards, it's a bit like prove your technology is safe, and then we'll let you put it in the cars. But that works for a company like Tesla, moving very quickly. But you also move incredibly quickly in a field. Can you talk about those milestones at Archer that you've achieved?
Yeah, sure. So maybe a little bit of context around strategy there. We knew at the beginning, right, it's certified, has to be safe, has to be manufactured at scale. And so we were very pragmatic, I would say, in where we chose to push versus be a little more conservative and take less risk. So a big differentiator in the performance of these aircraft is the powertrain, right? If the motors are less weight, you have higher payload, longer range. If the batteries are higher energy density, longer range, you can take more payload. I mean, these are the key drivers. But then going back to the contingent of our team and our partners that come from the more traditional aerospace industry, those folks have been developing extremely safe, extremely robust systems and products, say flight computers and inertial navigation systems. So when we looked at, hey, where do we want to invest our time, we tried to pick the right mix of vertically integrate where it really matters, but partner with great existing companies to take advantage of their certification experience and knowledge, and really make sure we have the, I would say, least risk path to market. So that's kind of the overall context. On a more tactical front, what was really important to us was engaging with the regulators super early. So, an aircraft has to be proven safe to the government of wherever you're operating. So we're based in the US, we're certifying in the US, so that means the FAA. And what we did is reached out basically when the company started building those relationships, started working with the regulator to understand exactly what the requirements will be that we need to design to. And that's like a huge differentiator. So I know from past experience, if you design an aircraft and then take it to a regulator and say, hi, I'd like to certify this, it's very challenging because you can never guess exactly what their perspective will be. So having that really collaborative relationship, both with the regulator, supply base, and kind of the broad perspectives, I think that's why we've been successful.
Was that one of the keys of making the prototype, the maker, to show people, to demonstrate this is the path we're on, it's not finished yet, but come and have a conversation with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the product that we're certifying is one pilot plus 4 passenger aircraft. It's called Midnight. But the last several years, we've been flying a prototype vehicle, full scale. It's called Maker. And exactly to your point, the purpose there was to show the FAA, hey, here's the type of vehicle we're certifying. Here's what the systems look like. Also to prove to the world, right, that these are real vehicles. And if you come out to California, where we do our flight testing, we're flying vehicles that weigh thousands of pounds every day and demonstrating all the capabilities. So again, it's about gathering data for our own validation purposes, being able to show the regulators this is real, being able to show future customers and partners that this is all happening. And it's been great progress. How did the investment from Stellantis come about? So actually, we started working with, it was Fiat Chrysler at the time, for the Stellantis merger. And it came about because we were very proactive in thinking, hey, if this is successful and the market materializes like we think, manufacturing is ultimately going to look more like automotive than aerospace today. So if you look at some of the highest volume aerospace manufacturing companies for relatively small aircraft, sub 10,000 pound aircraft, those companies are making hundreds of aircraft per day. There's no chance that we solve these mobility problems if we're just making a couple hundred aircraft here or there. But at the same time, we need to be thoughtful, and we can't go build the aircraft that we could produce hundreds of thousands today. So we engaged Stellantis, and we started learning about their capabilities, philosophies around automation and manufacturing. When Stellantis came about and was more than just Fiat Chrysler, we started talking with some of their other brands like Maserati, who have experience making lower volume cars. So there's models of Maserati that are produced a couple thousand units per year, and we found this really great synergy. We were learning a lot from them, and they're also looking at this industry thinking long term. They're believers, this makes sense. So what an opportunity to leverage their manufacturing and logistics capabilities. And so that's really what we're focused on today. So I mentioned that factory we're building out in Georgia. Stellantis team has been instrumental in helping us stand that up. So we've got 2 or 3 dozen Stellantis employees that are kind of merged in with our team and working together, learning from each other to turn this into reality.
Wow, well, you've completely lit a fire under me about this. It's so exciting. I'm a bit of an AV nerd anyway, and so I like aviation. Anyone from London in the audience? I used to live somewhere called Richmond, which is just on the landing path to Heathrow. So landing gear down, so pretty close. And I'd sit there with my flight radar app of a morning with my coffee going, oh yes, that's the Airbus. So I'm a bit of a nerd about this anyway. And I'm so excited. Can you tell us more about the Urban Air network? And the timescale seems incredible that you're working to. It's so close, and it's going to change so many things.
Absolutely. So, Archer's been working on this for about 5 years. Been flying aircraft for the last few. Been certifying aircraft with the FAA for the last 3 years. We're targeting entry into service in 2025. But we're taking a slightly different approach than, say, a traditional aircraft development program. So we're not just selling airplanes and then saying, hey, people that purchase these, go figure out how to use it. We're looking at this much more holistically. So we're thinking of the full ecosystem that you need to deliver this type of a service. Because end of the day, that's what we're providing, is an amazing service to a customer to be able to move around these cities that I've been talking about. And you can't do that with just the airplane. There's also the infrastructure that the airplane requires. There's the operational aspects. There's the airspace integration. So again, our strategy around all this has been to be very pragmatic and understand that this is going to be a step-by-step, learning process. So early days, we're planning to go to market in a relatively small number of markets. We'll be launching fleets of 10, 20, 30 aircraft with our partners. One of our partners on the operational side is United Airlines. So they both purchased aircraft from us, but then are also working to help us integrate with their operations. So a particular example is, again, we talked about Manhattan to Newark Airport in New Jersey, greater New York City area. They have a big hub there. We're working with them as we speak to integrate how our operations of these eVTOL aircraft will tie into their operations of their airline aircraft out of there. So you could imagine next time you're on a flight from Manhattan on United, say, back over to London, you could check in at the West 30th Street heliport, take an Archer for a 7-minute trip over to Newark, and then hop right onto your long-haul airline flight to get back home.
Amazing. What are the biggest challenges facing you now in 2023?
So I'd say the elephant in the room is the certification piece. So the thing people are most skeptical about, I would say, is our ability to execute on the certification timeline. And what I would say there is we've been, again, super diligent in setting up our path really efficiently from the beginning to minimize risk. And what we've seen in the US from the regulator there is extremely strong support for the industry. So I think if you maybe take a bigger step back here, we're focused right now on this very specific mission of moving people in and around cities with these small aircraft. But I'm convinced that this is really the beginning of the next major transformation in aerospace. So if you think back to the last time there was a big change, it was the introduction of turbine engines, right? And all of a sudden with that technology, you could go from, I'm here with everybody here in London today. I'll be back in San Francisco for dinner tonight, right? How incredible is that? We take it for granted now, but 70 years ago, that was not the case. I think if you look forward another couple decades, we're going to have this similar realization that, hey, wow, I just, jumped out of my meeting in San Francisco and I hopped over to a meeting with somebody in Napa, right, which I could never do today on the ground, and then had another meeting in San Jose, and then went to my house, on the coast, on the other side of the mountains, and did this 100% sustainably, as safe as commercial airliners, for essentially a cost that would make this accessible to everybody. That new freedom of mobility that's enabled by electrification of aviation, I think is going to be completely transformative. So yeah, I just can't wait.
It is the preserve at the moment of billionaires, much to the frustration, I'm sure, of Elon Musk and that Twitter account that used to chart his jet going just 20 minutes. And they think, well, that's not the most environmental thing to do. I'm not sure if that Twitter account is still running now he owns it. But it sounds like the potential is there to democratize this kind of travel. But how quickly will that happen? And who will be the first customers, the initial customers, because markets often start at one place and work their way down a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you're an EV owner, I know. So I'm sure you understand how much easier the maintenance are for these systems, right? So if you compare the capabilities of the aircraft we're developing to a helicopter, it does about the same thing, right? Takes off vertically, flies you from A to B, gives you that experience. But obviously, the downsides with helicopters are they're incredibly loud, so that prevents them from really being embedded into communities. It's just obnoxious. They're also not particularly safe because they rely on these very complex mechanical systems that we don't require since we have redundant, simple electric systems. And then the last thing is, again, because the maintenance, the operating costs can be so low of these aircraft that we're developing. So when we go to market in 2025, we are extremely confident we will be able to provide a service that's available and accessible from a price point perspective to a broad swath of the public. So we're talking about on a per seat mile basis, prices similar to like a Uber Black, rideshare car type price. So that, again, that reference mission, right? You're in Manhattan, you're going to JFK, you're going to Newark, like $100.
Wow.
Not bad.
Wow, not bad. Well, you came straight here from Paris and the air show, where of course you've been at. How was it? And my final question is do the industry realize that we're on the brink of a massive change?
Yeah, so it was a fantastic last few days at the Paris Air Show. We brought our aircraft out there, got incredible reception. People know this is happening. That's no longer a question. The only comment I get is, hey, I'm a believer. I just don't know if it's going to be next year or the year after or the year after. But the great thing on our side, or from my perspective, is we have the clear path, we have the resources we need, and we're just out there building the future and making it happen. So can't wait.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming to talk to us today. This is so exciting. We can't wait to find out more. Tom Muniz from Archer, thank you very much.
Thank you.